And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go.
Hello again, and welcome to American Top 40. I'm Casey Kasem, and I want to thank Dave. Debuting this week at number 36.
Morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment. I'm David Iverson. This is Cowboy State Politics Live, speaking to you from behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone, firing on all cylinders this morning. It's just a phrase I picked up on the way to the office this morning, driving by the automobile garbage pillar. If you haven't seen it, you have to come to Sheridan and look at this thing. It is just another example of what people in government think is a good idea and what it usually turns out to be, a pile of garbage. And I'm not even kidding. This thing is a pillar of car bumpers. It's the most ridiculous piece of quote-unquote art I've ever seen.
We have sound bites that we like to refer to now and then that are kind of standards. Words mean things others.
Yes.
We need to just have that image pop up now and then whenever somebody's being
a complete moron. I think it's perfect. In fact, during the break, maybe one of us should run out there and take a picture of it. No, never mind. I don't even want to look at it. Well, welcome to the program, my friends. This is Cowboy State Politics Live on a Thursday. I'm David Iverson. If you want to be part of the program this morning, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. Why, my friends, do some businesses prosper while some businesses fail? You see, we live in the greatest country that God ever created, and in it, you have an equal opportunity as everybody else to succeed or fail. Now, if you come up with an idea that you think is fantastic, that it's the best idea that you've ever heard of, well, then you can start a business. And if everybody agrees with you that your idea is absolutely tremendous, it's the best idea anybody's ever seen. Everybody says so. It's the best idea in the history of the world. If it is one of those ideas and everybody agrees with you, well, then it'll prosper. But if it turns out that your idea sucks, well, your business is going to fail. That, my friends, is the free market. That good ideas rise to the top and bad ideas sink to the bottom of ignominy. How do you pronounce that word? Ignominy?
I don't.
It's a good word. It popped into my head. And that's one of the reasons why, and you and I were talking about this before the show, that I miss William F. Buckley. Have you ever tried to read anything that guy wrote? I mean, it's not that he used big, huge words just to lead people to believe how smart he was. I mean, he just had a tremendous vocabulary, and because our vocabulary is so small, it's really hard to read. But anyway, if you have a good idea and you think it's fantastic, well, then give it a shot. If you want to open a business, whether it's a bakery or if it's a cleaning service or if it's a news radio program that happens to operate on the internet, if it is successful and people agree with you, then it'll prosper and you'll make money. But if it sucks, well, then your business will fail. And that's how things ought to work.
Yeah, we have a story coming up a little bit about a business that fails after 119 years. And it didn't necessarily fail because the pattern worked, but we'll get to that.
Well, yeah, but see, and that's, you've got to read your audience, right? If you're into public speaking, and Ken talks about this a lot, he has a lot of events with his constituents, but you got to read the room. You got to know who your audience is, and you've got to appeal to them. And if you don't, well, then you're going to get booed off the stage, and your appearance is going to be pretty short-lived. It is the free marketplace of ideas. And this is very similar to what we commonly refer to as the free market. Generally speaking, the free market is the broad one, and that it involves everything from, products that you might come up with, widgets, to ideas, to art, to anything that might be popular. Now, the free marketplace of ideas is very similar, but it's information, it's thoughts, it's the things that you think about. Well, the good ideas, the ones that will work, well, then they tend to rise to the top. The cream always rises to the top. And those ideas that are terrible, well, then you don't go along with them. The architect that sucks at building bridges, he'll have a bridge fall down, and then he's no longer an architect. But it works that way. And there's one big business in America that was a good idea, is still a good idea, is perhaps one of the things that keeps our republic functioning. But when you start monkeying with it, that's when it tends to fail. Yesterday, and this news story is everywhere, but there were 8 Wyoming newspapers, kind of across the state, that were closed by their parent company. And there's a number of reasons for that. But let's just first go to the cow pie. And let me tell you about this story. It's entitled Blindsided. 8 Wyoming towns lose their newspaper after abrupt shutdown. And I quote, 8 rural communities across Wyoming are without legacy hometown newspapers after parent company News Media Corp abruptly closed them without notice Wednesday morning. Employees said that they were blindsided and called the move devastating. 8 rural communities across Wyoming are without their legacy hometown newspapers after parent company News Media Corp abruptly closed them without notice on Wednesday morning. Employees said, they just repeated that. 8 rural, this includes the Pinedale Roundup, which has been the local newspaper for folks in that western community for 121 years. As with all News Media Corporation-owned newspapers, editor Callie O'Hare and office manager Madeline Kosiba found out that they were out of their jobs through a phone call and an emailed corporate separation letter. Shortly afterward, the separation letter came through telling employees that Wednesday was their last day and that your employment with News Media Corp and or its affiliated companies will end permanently. It wasn't just the company's Wyoming newspapers that were shuttered. O'Hare said she was told that all News Media Corporation's newspapers have been shut down. A check of some of the social media of the other news media outlets also shows that they've been closed as well. That includes another 21 publications in other states operated by the Illinois-based corporation, according to its website. Now, the question is, why would a big corporation close all these newspapers? Well, because they became unprofitable, that their business model wasn't working. So what is their business model? To own a multiplicity of different hometown newspapers. So the question then becomes, is a hometown newspaper profitable? Now, I've maintained for a really long time that hometown newspapers are only able to survive because of public notices. In any given community, and the smaller community, the larger the impact of this is. But there just isn't the advertising or circulation to support the printing of a newspaper. It's tremendously important, tremendously expensive, rather, to print a newspaper. Now, here in Sheridan, we've got the Sheridan Depress, or the Sheridan Crapola, or the Sheridan Pile of Dog Doo-Doo, whatever you want to call it. And they've got their own printing press. But just imagine having to buy the paper, have the staff to operate the equipment, and run that thing every day. You have to sell a whole bunch of newspapers in order to make that profitable. And secondly, you have to have the advertisers to support it. Well, a lot of people now don't get their news from newspapers, and here's why. By the time it's printed, by the time the story is set on the page and ready to be print, it's already old news, and it's probably everywhere on the internet already. So that business model no longer functions, in the free marketplace. And don't take this as a big shock. There are a lot of horse-drawn taxi drivers that no longer have a job. There's a lot of people that used to operate stables in each Wyoming town that no longer have a job because things like cars came around.
Yeah, I was just thinking about whale oil delivery.
Yeah, well,
Not a lot of that going on.
Okay, that's another one. Milk delivery. Okay, now you no longer have to have your milkman come to the house every morning and deliver your milk. Though I found this out the last time I was in Jackson. There is still a milk delivery man in Jackson, Wyoming.
Yeah, that's something that I would bring back if I could, especially if
Yeah,
they'd have cheese or a couple of those other things. When I was in Germany, we had the beer man, and I
awesome.
loved that.
You can have the beer delivered to
Yep,
you.
yep.
That's incredible. But the point is, you don't need a milk delivery man if you can go to the corner grocery store and buy your milk yourself. You don't have to pay the guy to deliver the milk. You see, occupations come and go, and it's supply and demand. The economy has always functioned that way, and it's only when you start monkeying with the ideas of the free marketplace and supply and demand do things become outdated and we end up having to subsidize them, which is exactly what is happening with Wyoming newspapers because they are not competing in a free marketplace. Now, I once did a study of the Buffalo Bulletin, and this is, 2, 3 years ago. And I just kind of on the back of the envelope added up how much revenue they get just from court notices. Minutes of public meetings to the city council and the county commissioners, and the rap sheet. Okay, now the rap sheet, most newspapers don't get paid for that, but I just included it because I didn't know what other public notices they get paid for, and the total I came to in 1 year was over $100,000. 100 grand going to the Buffalo Bulletin just from those public notices. And that doesn't include all of the probate stuff, oil and gas notices, coal mining, real estate notices, all of those things. So you can just imagine how much, you could probably double or triple that number and just figure, okay, so there's at least $250,000 every year that's going to one Wyoming newspaper. You ever wonder why the classified section of a newspaper is so big? It's because they're getting paid for most of it. Not from you, but from government. You see, every town in Wyoming, it's probably America too, but definitely in Wyoming, they have to publish their notices in the paper of record. And the law literally says paper of record, which means the newspaper. And so towns are legally obligated to pay the local newspaper to publish whatever notices. And there's been attempts the last couple of years to change that. Maybe the public notice could appear on a website. And then there's questions, okay, so who's updating the website? How often is that going to be updated? Well, you could make the same claim about a newspaper. The only reason they publish those on time is they're getting paid for it. And it is long past time that we stop subsidizing newspapers. It is what some people refer to as a public-private partnership. I mean, it's subsidizing a private business, and that private business, if it were forced to compete in the free marketplace, it would probably cease to exist. Now, I have also maintained that if you develop a market, people will buy your product. If you produce something that's high quality and that fills a demand in the marketplace, people will buy it. One of my favorite outlets, The Blaze, Glenn Beck, I'm a big Glenn Beck fan. He decided he wanted to produce a news magazine. And I think it's a quarterly journal, but it's high quality paper, high quality photographs, and it's tremendously expensive because it costs a heck of a lot of money to produce something that's printed, and you have to produce content that doesn't have a time limit on it. And that's the problem with the news business, that all these stories, most of what I talk about on Cowboy State Politics Live, it's got a shelf life. And once that shelf life is over, it becomes old news and there's no reason to talk about it. Now, one of the ways, and let me draw a distinction here. One of the reasons why the Cowboy State Politics podcast is as successful as it is it doesn't rely on timely news. There's no, there have been stories that I've broken, that I've gotten a hold of, that, a good example of that one is Cyrus Western being investigated for all those election violations that never got prosecuted because Bridget Hill never pulled them off her desk because she never bothered to pick one of them up and read it or do anything about it. But I broke that story. But most of the time, it's a story that's been percolating for a while, and I just decided to talk about it. And the reason I have the big listener base that I do is, people want to hear what I think about it. That's why you're listening to the program right now, is you want to hear my opinion on things.
This show operates on themes.
Yes.
Yeah, principles, basic core tenets of, for example, the Republican Party. He said Republican Party.
Yeah. And where's my gavel? I have one.
He beat me
I need
down.
it.
Yeah.
See, I told you.
But that works. And we were talking this morning before we came on the air about why we were attracted to Rush Limbaugh in the beginning. But the first time I heard him was like, finally, there's somebody that says what I'm thinking.
Right.
And that's why I think this show is successful, because there are a lot of people out there who need the reinforcement. Yeah, maybe I'm not alone.
Yeah. Well,
there are other people that think that way.
Point me to another media source that one has the outstanding ability that this show has, and two has this show's perspective.
Hey, while you're at it, you got that gavel down. You should tell how you got that. We need to pull some things off that shelf every now and then and just explain what's up there.
So this gavel, when I was in high school, I went to the National Speech and Debate tournament, and it was held in Fayetteville, North Carolina. It was the event I qualified for nationals in was Student Congress. And there had only been, up till that point, there had only been one other student from Wyoming who ended up, in the top of the heap at the end of the national tournament. And his name was Ryan Mulholland. He used to be the chairman of the Wyoming Republican Party until he got a gig working for Google. I haven't talked to him for years. Anyway, at the end of that tournament, I ended up 13th out of, I don't know, however many hundred people qualified for nationals, but 13th in the country. And if places 1 through 12 were awarded a gavel, I was number 13, and I was pissed because I didn't get a gavel. And so my debate coach, who happened to be the woodshop teacher, made me this gavel. And so that's how I got now I have another one at home that was for winning the national debate tournament in college, but it's not nearly as impressive as this one. And every time I see the Speaker of the House in Cheyenne pick up the gavel, I'm like, the one thing that goes through my head is mine's bigger. But I have that thought a lot. Anyway, moving on. So we were talking about the media. One of the reasons why the media is failing is they're competing in what they're supposed to be competing in a free market, but they're not operating on the same level as everybody else because they have government subsidization. Well, even that is not enough to overcome what's happening online. And I mentioned that by the time you print a newspaper, it's already old news. Everybody probably already knows it. And most people don't read a newspaper anymore because it's much more convenient to get their news on one of these things than it is to, go to the store and purchase the newspaper or to wait until it shows up in your mailbox. Now, if you produce good content, people would probably wait. Now, here's the third reason why newspapers in Wyoming are failing. Because they're entirely biased. Because it has become apparent in the last, 5 to 8 years that all of these news outlets have an agenda. And it's an agenda that a lot of people don't agree with. And a perfect example of that, I'll give you two of them, is the Buffalo Bull Crap and the Sheridan Press. They are entirely left-leaning. And I challenge you to pick up one of those newspapers and find an opinion piece or an article that is, right-leaning. I bet you can't find one because the people that own those papers are rabid liberals.
I think there's one phase or one facet of culture that these small papers really do serve well, and that is local sports.
Now, okay, that is true.
I think, everything else, I look through the Sheridan Press. I don't read it necessarily, but I look through the Sheridan Press every day, see if they told any lies about me or that sort of thing. But there aren't any news items that come up in that thing that I haven't already been aware of. Probably I've already read it somewhere online, so they're just regurgitating what was there. But the large section and the large part of a lot of these papers that people appreciate, and I appreciate as well, is just the local sports. The high school kids get a chance to to be featured.
Right, have their picture in the paper. That was always a big thing when I was in school. So yeah, I mean, I think that most local papers do a pretty good job of covering sports. And to be entirely fair, I think that there's value in having a hometown opinion. Right, left, center, whatever. I think there's value in having that opinion in your hometown. And I think if you look at the Buffalo Bulletin, it's one of those papers that's been around for forever, probably since right after the town was incorporated. But they do have a certain tenor, and they're entirely left leaning. I mean, there was a time where it was during COVID. I was counting how many articles were printed about you wearing a mask, and I don't remember the number I got up to, but it was a huge amount. Well, anyway, there's a big reason why newspapers are failing, but it also creates, and the same thing is happening with news websites, and it's a fascinating thing to watch. That depending on which news website you look at, they have the same attributes as a newspaper. Why? Because they're run by people. And you can also tell that there are major gaps in the market where somebody could produce something new, something different, something that fills a need in the local community. Yeah, I'll tell you more about that in the coming days and weeks. I've got an idea that it's more than an idea now. It's a project that I've been working on. Frankly, I don't think that anybody at the Cowboy or any at the Turkey Vulture or at the Pravda on the Platte or any of them have seen coming. But anyway, I'll tell you more about that when it's closer.
I think what you're doing is interesting in that the way to make a business function, the way to create a business, is find the need and fill it.
Yep.
It's a basic tenet of capitalism. And you look around and you think, what is it that I would like to have or that I think other people would like to have that is not currently out there?
Exactly.
And when you stumble across something, man, that would work. Okay, maybe it will, maybe it won't. Maybe you're just weird and other people won't like what it is you produce.
I don't see how that's entirely
fine.
possible.
If they
at
do,
all.
though, you can always apply to the state for a grant.
That's true. I probably wouldn't get one because everybody already knows me. But you're exactly right, Ken. The reason why Cowboy state politics was so successful in the very beginning is there was no conservative media outlet. I mean, there wasn't any. You could survey the entire breadth of Wyoming media, and there was not one single outlet that had even a conservative leaning opinion. And so I created Cowboy state politics, and voila, it has grown into what you see today. Now, another good example of this, and this isn't a Wyoming example, but I think it's one that everybody has heard of, Howard Stern. Just like Stephen Colbert, he is about to be out of a job. And part of it is because his program is no longer profitable. They're paying him $100 million a year, Sirius Radio is. And he's not popular, but he worked himself out of a job. Now compare Howard Stern to the success of Rush Limbaugh. So when Rush Limbaugh first started, AM radio was dying. It still is dying. I mean, it's been dying for the last 30 years. But nobody was really using AM radio, and the thought with a lot of news people was that AM radio was going to go the way of the dinosaur, the way of the stable owner in your hometown. But Rush Limbaugh had an idea that if you did conservative talk radio, that people would buy it, people would pay to listen to it, and that it would be successful. And shockingly, he was right. And he provided a service for over 30 years during the same time period that Howard Stern was on the radio, and Rush Limbaugh's program became the most successful radio program in the history of radio. He had the largest radio audience of anybody, even more than Howard Stern. But now Howard Stern has worked himself out of a job, and it is for the very same reasons that a lot of these newspapers in Wyoming are failing, because the jig is up, because people realize what's going on, and because Howard Stern went decidedly to the left, and it was all leftist politics from the beginning of his show till the end, interspersed with a little bit of vulgarity and stupid celebrities that nobody really wants to talk to anyway. Nobody listened to him anymore because they found out exactly who Howard Stern is. And so it's just another example of supply and demand. Stephen Colbert is another one. Okay, he used to be funny when he started on Comedy Central. I mean, he was blatantly, a leftist, but still, I mean, we have to appreciate self-deprecating humor. There's a great show that I love. It's on Amazon Prime. It's called Alpha House. It's got John Goodman and a couple other people, but it's making fun of Republican senators. It's absolutely hilarious if you're a politico like me. Well, Stephen Colbert was the same thing, right? Humorous in the same sort of way, just making fun of Republicans. But instead, he switched from comedy and went straight on the left, spread his two left wings, and he flew the coop. And now his show is no longer profitable. They can't pay his salary, $40 million a year, which, by the way, I don't understand why you would pay somebody that amount and lose money on their show. I mean, shows like Rush Limbaugh, he always used to joke that he charged confiscatory advertising rates because he had the largest audience in America. And if you wanted to advertise your product, the number one place you could have it on was on the Rush Limbaugh program. I mean, you get your advertising on that one, man, you were good to go. And the same holds true for other big radio programs like Sean Hannity or Glenn Beck. You get your show or your idea on their program, boom, it takes off. But the reason why Howard Stern, Stephen Colbert, newspapers in Wyoming are failing is because they have failed to fill the need in the marketplace. And in many ways, they have kind of outlived their usefulness. And I'm not saying that they wouldn't be successful if they stuck with the same economic principles. I think that they probably would be. They'd have to change their model a little bit, but because they've abandoned those principles, that's why they're failing.
We've talked quite a bit about Sydney Sweeney and the American Eagle jeans.
Brilliant advertising.
Yeah, and part of the reason it was brilliant and the timing was there was a pent-up need.
Yes.
Those sort of things had been repressed, had been pushed back, and people were looking for that. I'm not saying that that's what people should look for.
I don't know, man.
Heart of a man's only.
I think you got a big problem if you're not looking at
the heart
Sweeney.
Of a man is only evil continually.
Yeah, well, I mean, the heart is exceedingly wicked, and who could know it? But come on, Sydney Sweeney's kind of hot, and it's a beautiful piece of advertising. And she's beautiful. She has good genes, apparently. But just think about the phenomenon that's created. Last night on, I can't remember which program it was. Maybe it was on Fox News at night or something. But there's a new young country artist that she wrote a song 4 years ago about her genes, and it was a play on words. Of course, she was talking about the way she was raised, and she said her husband showed her this ad and said, "This is the time to release this song," and it went viral, just like that, because you see a need in the marketplace, you can fill that need, and you let it loose. And just see what happens. And that is honestly, Ken, that is, and my friends, that is one of the beautiful things about America, that anybody that has a good idea and that it's the right place at the right time, you can be successful. All you have to do is apply yourself. And, in some cases you need money to do that, but you get people to believe in you, believe in the product, and you can do it yourself. All it takes is dedication, hard work, and a good idea, and you can be successful. That, my friends, is what America is all about. But again, when you abandon those free market principles, when you decide that you want to focus on government subsidies and you get your paycheck from the government, then, well, your business is probably going to fail. It's going to go to the way of the dinosaur, the stable owner, and unfortunately, a lot of Wyoming newspapers. I'll be back in a minute. Are you tired of all the meaningless political drivel floating around right now? Endless commentary that really doesn't have anything backing it up? Do you long for the days of true investigative journalism coming from an authoritative source who really doesn't care how popular and apparently good-looking a politician is? Fortunately for you, that's what I do on Cowboy State Politics. New episodes are published every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, and you can get them anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There, you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles I might bring up during the course of the program. Cowboy State Politics Live, the program you're listening to right now, is broadcast every Tuesday through Friday, beginning at 8 a.m. Pay attention to all of that other block-headed nonsense if you want. Just make sure that you don't miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics. And now, back to our program. Did you notice that transition into the break, my friends? That is excellence at work right there. Notice I did not steal another phrase from Rush. See, I held myself and didn't do that.
We're the EIW, which sounds like ew.
No, not at all. Well, welcome back to the program, my friends. It's Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson, doing what I was born to do and having more fun than, frankly, anybody should be allowed to have. And thank you for joining me. And thank you very much for listening to the program, this program and the podcast. And, it's without you, I wouldn't be doing this program because, well, frankly, there'd be no reason to do this program. But thank you for listening, my friends. If you want to be part of the show, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989. Now, I found another disturbing story this morning that, I think that we all kind of intuitively know this, but it's a real challenge, I think, that all of us should take up. And if we value the republic that we live in, we should definitely take this up. But the New York Post has a story this morning that says that young adults are less likely to follow politics or even say that voting is important, according to a poll that was put out by the Associated Press. Quote, just a couple paragraphs from the piece. Marique Griffiths, a 26-year-old cook in a Denver suburb, doesn't think he'll ever pay a lot of attention to U.S. politics unless radical change happens. Quote, if another party is likely to win, I'd be interested in that, says Griffiths, who voted for Democrat Kamala Harris. Well, there's our first problem. In last year's presidential race, but like many his age, does not see voting as valuable. I can't say either way that voting matters, Griffiths says. It's just picking the least bad option. That's what I remember my whole life. Both sides are bad, but this side is less bad. Young people such as Griffiths are less engaged with U.S. politics than older Americans and less likely to say voting is important, according to a new poll by the Associated Press. Young people, even those who follow politics closely, are less likely to say issues such as the economy, government spending, and healthcare are, quote, extremely important to them than their counterparts in older adults. The findings point to a broad sense of disillusionment among younger people about the country's political system, even if, like Griffiths, they still end up casting a ballot. Alberto Medina, who leads, I wonder where he's from, that was terrible of me. But, I mean, I've been watching stories about illegal immigration for how long?
I'll bet he has good genes.
I bet he does have good genes. Who leads the Center for Information and Research on Civic Engagement at Tufts University, which studies youth and politics, noted that turnout among young people hit record levels in the 2020 election and was high last year. There's a sense that democracy isn't working for young people. There's a lack of belief that democracy is even able to improve their lives, said Medina. And at the same time, we've been living in an era of high youth voting. And let's go back to the Barack Obama administration. I know, it makes me twitch too, Agent 29. But there again, I mean, there's one of the job hazards of working, in this program is that you end up developing a nervous twitch for, just different things. There said Barack Obama. I mean, it's just, anyway, there was a lot of youth excitement about him. And I don't know that there's any one thing that you could put your finger on, but he was young. He was different. He was a community organizer. If you read his book, he's a flat out socialist, which I've got a story about that in a
The
little
crease
bit.
in his trousers.
Yeah, the crease in his trousers. Chris Matthews said it sent a thrill up his leg. It's still, I mean, we've got to get that soundbite, but, it still kind of grosses me out. But he was new, right? He was different than any other politician, not this stodgy old guy that's been in the Senate for 20 years. He was different, and he excited a lot of young people and got a lot of people out to vote. Same thing with Hillary. I'm with her. Everybody remember that? Of course, Hillary wasn't nearly as successful as Barack Obama, but the same phenomenon happened. The first female candidate. Wasn't that exciting? Oh, wow, we've never had one of those before, even though it was probably Hillary Clinton that was running the Bill Clinton administration. But, we didn't really know that, or a lot of people didn't know that during that administration. But the findings in this study or this poll point to a broad sense of disillusionment. In another sign of their general disengagement or disengagement and estrangement from politics, the poll shows that young adults are more likely to reject political party labels. About 1/3 of adults under the age of 30 identify as political independents who don't lean toward either major political party, compared with 17% of Americans age 60 or older. The poll also finds that young people are far less likely to follow politics closely than older adults are. Only about 2 in 10 adults under the age of 30 say they follow politics extremely or very closely, compared with about 1/3 of Americans overall. That's even higher among adults age 60 or older. 45% of this group say that they follow U.S. politics at least very closely. Now, and hold on, there's one more little thing here. Disengagement is higher among teenagers, finding that 44% of teens aged 13 to 17 report following U.S. politics not very closely or not closely at all. Okay, so this is not news. Younger people typically do not follow politics as closely as older people. And there's one big reason why. A lot of younger people haven't had to start paying taxes yet. Once you start paying taxes and you start having to give part of your money to the government and you realize how they're spending your money, you tend to be more involved in politics. That's why, people that are older, have, made their living in the world, are the folks that you see engaged in politics. And it makes sense, right? If you're young, you've got other things going on in your life. You're chasing women and trying to get married. Well, probably not get married, but definitely chasing women. And you got other things going on. Politics is furthest from your mind. And there's the old adage that if you're not a socialist when you're 20, you may not have a heart, but if you're not a conservative by the time you're 40, then you definitely don't have a brain. And that's absolutely true. And the reason why I say that is if you honestly look at how politicians spend your money, what the government is doing to your freedom, that is, and here's another thing, right? You probably don't understand private property rights until you actually own property, until it's yours, until you've worked hard to pay for it, and it's your hard work that keeps it up. Until you have to do that, you're not going to fully grasp what private property rights are, right? It's just the house you live in. There's nothing else that goes into it, right? If you're not paying for it, if you're not paying the taxes on it, then you're not going to appreciate it nearly as much. So the study makes sense. But the question is, and this has been a question for a really long time, every Republican meeting that I go to, this question comes up, hey, how do we get the young people involved? And I think that's a question that's been asked for as long as politics has been around. But an interesting shift happened, I would say, 30 to 40 years after the signing of the Constitution or the ratification of the Constitution. Here's why I say that. Most of our founders, not all of them, but many of our founders were very, very young. They were in their 20s during their late teens and early 20s during the Revolutionary War. So very young people engaged in a new government. All right, so the country exists for 20 or 30 years. Everything's going grand. Most things are going grand. And you get into this feeling of complacency. And that's where I think that a lot of young people are at. Everything's going pretty good in their lives, so why should they pay attention to who's running for the city council? I mean, it makes sense. And, Ken, you have, and this is a good question for you. You have campaigned way more than I have. I once joked tried to joke with you, but hey, man, you don't have a new pair of boots, so you must not be out going door to door. And at the time, Ken says, "Oh, I beg to differ, David." And he walks to his truck and gets a pair of boots that he had worn the soles off of. And he goes, "I just had to buy a new pair." But anyway, my question for you, Agent 29, is when you're campaigning, and I'm sure that you knock on doors of younger people. Do you find that younger people are less engaged with what you have to say than older people?
There's a break. Yeah, most of the people that I talk to are probably in their 50s, 60s. Those are the people that are active when you go to the meetings. You see them. And I think sometimes across the country, especially, those people are watching because they're about to receive their benefits and they don't want
Sure.
somebody to take them away.
Sure.
So I get a lot of questions about that. I earned these. You're not going to undercut me. And certainly there's a point there. What I'm seeing, though, and I've read several articles about it nationally, but what I'm also seeing here locally is what is popularly called Gen Z.
Yeah.
Those kids are taking an acute interest. We see it. We have our annual Reagan Day dinner, and we have a bunch of kids come
Yes.
to that.
I cannot wait to talk about that,
Yeah,
by the way.
and you see more of those coming in. I see a lot more interest on Facebook from a certain strata of friends, and I consider it a good thing. And I think it's a little bit similar to what you just mentioned. 30 years after the signing of the Constitution, there's a lot of discontent with the phoniness that has built up over the years, and I think they're going to right the ship.
So there's a big reason for that, Ken. It's because your Generation Z, those are the kids that had to go through COVID. And when it was going on, there was a sense in the media, well, these kids are able to study from home. It'll be good for them. They didn't get to see their classmates. They didn't get to go to school. Their progress in school was severely depressed. I think that most studies said that students that went through COVID lost at least a grade, maybe a grade and a half worth of education. So those folks who had to go through COVID and put up with the repression from our government, they are more highly attuned to government involvement than perhaps any other generation. And I think that there's a sense that you can't fool me. What you're saying is bullcrap. I went through COVID. And one of the more powerful tools now, definitely in the media, is if you can tie whatever somebody is doing in politics to COVID, it will go like wildfire. You will make your point. Let me give you a great example. Right now, and I talked about this yesterday on the program, and this thought occurred to me during the weekend while Christine and I were traveling. By the way, I was actually in Aladdin when I thought of this. If you've never been to Aladdin, you need to go check out that general store. It's a small town of 15 people. It's great. One of the things that Christine and I do is we make a point to go to all of these really small towns in Wyoming. You just kind of check them off of our list. It's kind of fun. Anyway, so I was in Aladdin, and I thought, you know what? All these folks with all this nuclear stuff, the nuclear waste storage, they're the same folks that lied to us during COVID. And let me explain. We had a special session in Wyoming in 2021, and the whole reason for it was to deal with Biden's vaccine mandate. The mandate, we knew it was imminent, that Biden was going to say everybody's got to jab a piece of metal into their arm, or you're going to lose a lot of people in the military lost their job because of it. But Wyoming decided to have a special session. Well, in order to make that happen, it's either the governor or the legislature itself has to vote. And I could not figure out why all of these supposedly conservative people were voting against having a special session. Why on earth would you not want to get into that Capitol building and deal with Joe Biden's mandate? If you are conservative at all, you would want to deal with that. And what I found is there was a whole bunch of Republicans who claimed to be conservative that voted against having the special session. And when I dug into it, what I found is every single person that voted against having a special session took money from the Wyoming medical lobby, Pfizer, or the Wyoming Education Association. And in most cases, they took money from all of those. And then they go into session and they vote on on legislation that directly impacts those people that gave them campaign money. And some of them, like Lloyd Larson, he took money from Pfizer after the special session. And I'm not saying it was for a job well done, but I'm saying that there are no coincidences in Wyoming politics. So those same people that said, trust us then, trust us with your freedom, trust us with what we're doing in this special session, and they broke that trust. Those are the same people that are asking you to trust them with this nuclear waste storage business. By the way, just a couple of examples of people on that committee. Jim Anderson, he took money from the Wyoming Medical Lobby, and Slithers Nethercott. She took money from the Wyoming Medical PACs. And by the way, Anderson, he took money from 3 different medical political action committees before that special session. Slithers, same thing there, but she also took money from Pfizer. Now, I didn't look to see if
Senator French, that's currently the law now. In order to attend public school, you must be immunized, but your children don't have to attend public school. It's all a choice.
Ugh.
There is no doubt, I mean, from all the medical information out there, that we are in a pandemic of the unvaccinated.
It's those
If
same
everyone was
folks.
vaccinated, this pandemic would be gone.
Yep. It's those same folks that during COVID said, trust us. We will handle this. We're going to Cheyenne and we're going to handle this thing. And then they broke your trust. They didn't do a darned thing during that special session. Oh, excuse me. They did pass a bill to give more money to lawsuits. And they worked on a gambling bill, which is, by the way, which is another reason why you shouldn't have a convention of states, because that same thing will happen. But those people said, trust us. They broke your trust. And it's the same people that are asking you to trust them now. And you wonder why people get apathetic with politics. It's because your trust is broken over and over and over again. So we should have no question as to why people, the young people like Generation Z, are having a hard time trusting the government. It's no wonder why they're more engaged than any other generation. And this is also the reason why a lot of young people are disengaged. They're disillusioned. They're fed up with politics as usual because it's the same people. For example, this morning when we rolled into the studio, first thing Ken asks me when I hop out of the vehicle is, "Hey, did you listen to what John Barrasso just said?" And I said, "Well, no, I wasn't listening to that program." And he said, "Well, yeah, we're going to add another layer of government to Obamacare. You know, we're gonna give more money away." So wait a minute. For years, you've been telling us Obamacare is a bad thing and you're going to repeal it, and now we're just making it bigger?
Well, what actually happened was, in the big beautiful bill, there's $50 billion to go to rural hospitals. Rural hospitals are not making it, in part, Barrasso points out, because of Obamacare.
Yeah.
And so rather than repeal Obamacare, let's throw more money at it on another layer. Let's have the government pick more winners and losers. Let's rob from Peter to pay Paul. Let's make it worse. And Barrasso's as bad as the rest of them. He's as much big government lost his mind as the rest.
Yeah, exactly right. And again, and you wonder why people don't follow politics, because they get in a place where, hey, it's the same stuff over and over. If it's not Mitch McConnell, which, by the way, if you ever wondered where John Barrasso was, just find Mitch McConnell, and Barrasso was attached to his right side. But yeah, and I get the imagery, but Barrasso, man, he's done some good things for veterans, but he's just a big government establishment.
Yeah, the imagery for me was more, Polly wants a cracker.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, the point is, my friends, that this survey, it's not news. It's the same thing that we've known for a while. And if you want to engage young people, it's the free marketplace, man. You've got to find the need, and you've got to find the itch and scratch it if you want young people engaged. And you know, I mean, that's the same holds true for the marketplace. Same holds true for media. All of it. Let's see here. What do we got next? You know what? Well, okay, we got about 10 minutes. We can do this. So there's a piece from the Federalist on this same topic, and it's entitled, "The News Media Aren't Biased by Accident, and There's No Saving Them." You see, the media as a whole, and I am including a lot of Wyoming newspapers, not all of them, but a lot of them, they're not biased by accident. It's not like it just happened all on its own. The media made a choice, and that is to push an agenda down your throat. They tried to do it with the last presidential election. If you notice, it didn't work because the jig is up and you know it. From the Federalist, quote, Terry Moran, Terry Moran is the guy that interviewed President Trump in the Oval Office, and Trump says, I chose you because nobody knows who you are. It's that guy. The longtime national correspondent who was recently fired by ABC News after posting a humiliating tweet has resurfaced with a Spitfire take right out of 2014. Yes, the dying news media is biased, he argues, but not on purpose. And this is, again, this is the Jake Tapper writing a book that there was a Biden cover-up about his mental decline, and it was covered up by Jake Tapper. I mean, this is the same type of thing. Terry Moran says the media is biased, he's biased, and he made a choice to be biased. That laughably deficient assessment was offered by Moran last week on his personal website and then credulously shared by the otherwise decent journalist Mark Halperin on Sunday via social media. We were biased? Asked Moran. Yes. Most inadvertently, I'd say. No, it wasn't inadvertent at all. ABC News has the same problem so many leading cultural institutions do in America, a lack of viewpoint diversity. See, these folks in the media, they're still caught up on all this diversity, equity, and inclusion. And what he's talking about here is you have newsrooms that are populated by leftists. You could survey any major newsroom in the country, and you'll be lucky if you find one or two Republicans. It's almost always populated by Democrats. He wrote a letter in the same article. Quote, he wrote later in the same article, there are hardly any people who supported Donald Trump at ABC News or the other corporate legacy mainstream news networks, which he said is bound to impact coverage, not so much out of malevolent bias, I would argue with that. That's the cartoon version peddled by Trump, but more out of what is a kind of deafness. Amazing stuff, as Halperin inexplicably described it. It's not amazing. The media chose to be biased. You don't get a newsroom that is made up entirely of Democrats, if not by choice, that you specifically hire those people. And it's only those media outlets that read the tea leaves that see that their opinion and their viewpoint is occupying a smaller and smaller piece of the pie. It's only those people that recognize that continue to be successful. But the mainstream media, and this goes into the reason why a lot of newspapers are failing, because their viewpoint is taken up by a smaller and smaller piece of the pie.
It's been said there's three kinds of people. There are people that make things happen. There are people that stand around and watch things happen. And there are people that stand around and wonder what just happened. Mm-hmm. But I think that explains why people liberals tend to gravitate toward the media. There are, I guess maybe you'd call it like a type A personality, an aggressive capitalist who goes out and says, I'm going to go make something of myself. I found a niche out there and I'm going to fill it and I'm going to create something.
Yes.
There are others who just sit back and watch that and then criticize it or try to explain why this person was just lucky, whatever.
Oh, I've heard them all.
Yeah, and that's the pattern that we see, is you have people who maybe never have done anything on their own, but have sat around and criticized the establishment, the people that actually did go out and do something. And I think that's why that is the way it is.
Oh, I think that you're right. And, again, this goes back to the principle of the stable owner in your hometown. There's a reason why he doesn't have a job anymore. It's because there's no need for horses. Similarly, there's no need for this biased viewpoint. But the Federalist goes on, quote, it's true that there was a time when most, maybe even the vast majority of media, negligence, inaccuracy, or otherwise broad malfeasance could be attributed to ignorance, incompetence, or even just petulance of homely nerds in Washington and New York. It was often their way of compensating for some personal shortcoming, like a lack of social grace or athleticism. It's what's the phrase that those who can't do teach? That if you're not successful, you can teach somebody how to be successful, which is a wonderful contradiction. Why we would ever want to elect somebody to the presidency of the United States who had never signed a paycheck is beyond me. But fortunately, we got over that hurdle. That's not what predominantly motivates the media anymore, and it hasn't been for the past decade. Now, the overriding aim is deliberate deception and manipulation for more overt political purposes. No serious person can dispute it, though Terry Moran voluntarily revealed himself as the unserious person back in June when he hosted a hysterical rant on X at midnight about Donald Trump and White House advisor Stephen Miller. Now, no one can have possibly witnessed 2024 and come out of it thinking, well, maybe the media has a bit of a blind spot. You couldn't see the result of that election and just say, oh, wow, maybe I missed that one. No, that is not possible. The media made a conscious choice to support the Democrats, even to the exclusion of all reason that we have to elect a Democrat. We cannot elect Donald Trump, and they seriously misjudged their audience. This is the same thing I've been talking about for the first hour of this program, that the reason the media is dying is they haven't paid attention to the free market, nor do they probably understand the free market at all. There was a Herculean effort of making over Kamala Harris, attempting to transition her from being a well-known Washington joke that only trafficked in word salad into a legitimate presidential candidate. Everyone in town, especially the media, knew she was drowning as the vice president. But the second she became the only politically realistic alternative to Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee, which tells you exactly where the Democrat Party is right now, that they don't have a backbench, they're like the Colorado Rockies that got nobody in reserve. Doesn't matter who strikes out at the plate, they can't put anybody up there to pinch hit for them. But the media dropped everything, and they hoisted Kamala Harris on their shoulders, and they tried to sprint for the finish line. Before that, they assisted the White House in lying to the public about the physical and mental health of the president. Jake Tapper, perfect example. And then he writes a book later and wonders why everybody is making fun of him. That, oh, really? It was covered up? By you. You're the one that covered it up. And it's no wonder why you know that there was a cover up there. But the media have a lack of credibility, that they refuse to acknowledge their own deficiencies and their own malfeasance, and they're not being honest with you, and which is why the mainstream media is dying. And we'll continue in just a minute, and we'll keep the program going in something that's actually successful, as opposed to all these idiots in the mainstream media that are dying. When we come back, we're going to talk about some places where maybe there isn't any assimilation going on. Zoran Mamdani, Minnesota, and what's happening in London. Next.
Ever since gold backing was removed from the dollar, the value has dropped significantly over the past few decades. Experts say this is one of the main reasons goods are more expensive and your savings are worth less each year. How would you know how many dollars to save for retirement if the valuation of the dollar changes over time? Would you work all week for that $20 gold piece? Let's look at the valuation of this coin from the 1970s to today. When President Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, this coin traded for about $275. Today, it trades for about $14,000. Buying and holding rare coins using only a fraction of your portfolio is our suggested way to save for the future. Call U.S. Coin Capital at 1-800-878-2646 to get your free United States gold and silver buyer's guide.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics. Welcome to Lessons in Civility by Morton Buildings. Gentlemen, is your garage completely jam-packed full of all of your unnecessary crap? And your lovely wife has been on your tail, nagging you non-stop to clean it out? It's not because she just wants to incessantly irritate you. Chivalry dictates that you should clear out a space so she can park her car inside and you don't end up sleeping on the couch anymore. To do that, contact Nick and Jesse at Morton Buildings. Their phone number is 307-674-2532. Not only are they the experts in metal building construction, they're also skilled at keeping you out of the doghouse. One more time. Their phone number is 307-674-2532, or you can check them out at their website, mortonbuildings.com. This has been Lessons in Civility from Morton Buildings. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. And you know how that happens? I actually value my credibility. I make sure that I check my sources, and when I'm wrong, I admit it. Unlike the mainstream Wyoming press or anybody in the media for that matter. And one of the things that we probably should admit that the media's got wrong, and they're not going to because they're right in the middle of this whole thing, is that socialism creates poverty, misery, and death. And it always has. As Rush Limbaugh said, the problem with socialism is not socialists, it's capitalists. It's the people at the top who are not going to be participating in the everybody is equal thing. You know, as Ken rightly pointed out yesterday, some animals are more equal than others. And that, my friends, is Mr. Zoran Mamdani. And there's a piece in the New York Post this morning, and I think that this is another revelation of the blatantly obvious, that Zoran Mamdani's New York City is going to look a lot like Sadiq Khan's far-left London, and New Yorkers should be terrified. In the history of political systems, socialism, communism, I mean, they're all birds of the same feather. They always create misery and death without exception. It's like Margaret Thatcher said, that it only works so long as you have other people's money to spend. And, that's why you end up with misery and death, that, you end up taking as much money as you can and spending it. And then, if you want equality, that's what you're going to have, and everybody is going to be equally poor. Well, that is exactly what, and to a degree, what happened in London. And there's a couple of reasons for this. First, socialism. Second, Islamism. What we are experiencing in the world is a coalition between Marxists and Islamists. And you may hear some commentators call it the Red-Green Alliance. And I mean, if you watch the national media, you will see that Marxists are hooked up with Islamists. And the reason for that is the genesis of both of those movements really is Marxist. I mean, it's just different flavors of the same soda company, right? It's or the same type of soda. It's Pepsi versus Coke. They're both colas. I would argue that one of them is better. Coke is definitely better than Pepsi, but when I could still drink it. But they're still the same type of thing. And Islamism and straight up Marxism, they're pretty much the same type of critter, which is why they produce the same results. It's also why you see a number of different groups in America allying themselves together. So, for example, the LGBTQ folks, the Islamists, the Democratic, so-called Democratic Socialists, and the regular mainstream Democrats. They're all allying themselves together because at their core, they're all pretty much the same type of political thought. It's all Marxism. It's all socialism. And if you live in New York and you have any money at all, you should get the heck out, because if Mamdani wins, you're not going to have any money to speak of, and it's going to be turned into a socialist hellhole. From the New York Post, and I quote. And this is Patricia Posner. It's an opinion piece, and she says, many of my friends and former neighbors in New York, where I lived for 27 years, are anxious about the city's future if it elects as mayor a self-proclaimed Muslim socialist. Another great world capital already offers a glimpse of what might lie ahead. London, under its far-left mayor Sadiq Khan. I recently returned to my native London for the first time in more than 2 decades, and what I found wasn't the inclusive cosmopolitan capital that I had known and loved, but a city so altered in tone and appearance that I scarcely recognized it. Now, over the course of a fortnight in June, neighborhood after neighborhood left me feeling not just like a visitor, but like a stranger in my own birthplace. At times, I felt more as though I was in Dubai rather than in London. Mayor Sadiq Khan, a Muslim of Pakistani heritage, has aggressively pursued a pro-immigration agenda during his last 8 years. Khan's London offers housing and social services that are a magnet for the record number of illegal immigrants flooding into Britain. Khan was reelected for a 3rd term this past May. Many of my friends and former neighbors in New York, where I lived for 27 years, are anxious about the city's future if it elects as mayor a self-proclaimed Muslim socialist. You should just drop the Muslim part and just say socialist, says author Patricia Posner. Now, this isn't about race or immigration alone, nor is it nostalgia for some imagined golden era. I'm the daughter of a first-generation Jewish immigrant from Eastern Europe and grew up in multicultural London during the 50s and 60s. It was a very different place. Okay, before I go any further, and this is another story that should remind us that America is not immune to the effects of socialism or massive illegal immigration or the lack of assimilation into our culture. And we constantly bring up the example of Dearborn, Michigan, where it is pretty much a Muslim community now. You can hear prayers broadcast from the mosque at noontime and at 3, and it's a Muslim neighborhood. But there's also some other places like Minnesota. Go ahead I've got a video for you. Go ahead and play it, Ken. This is Minnesota.
This is Savannah Hernandez in the Cedar Riverside area of Minneapolis, and I wanted to come to Minnesota to highlight the cultural and demographic change of the state that houses the largest Somali population in the U.S. Now, I'm currently standing in front of Palmer's Bar because this bar has been here for 119 years, and they are set to close down in September after living through the Prohibition, outliving 2 world wars, and the Great Depression. They're going to be closing down because the owners state that not only is the current economic condition taking a toll on the bar, but also the culture surrounding drinking in this area has changed so substantially that they're losing $10,000 to $30,000 every single month. Now, this is not the only bar on this strip of land that is closed down, by the way. 3 other bars have closed down in the last 13 years, as well as an iconic punk rock venue. Now, that venue, which locals had previously stated was a staple in Minneapolis for up-and-coming punk rock bands, that closed down and has since been turned into an African restaurant. And this bar has been bought out by the mosque that is next door to it. It is the oldest Somali mosque in Minneapolis, by the way. They have bought this area, and they're now going to be combining it with their mosque and turning it into a community center. So just wanted to give you guys an idea of how the culture is changing in this area. You have a lot of these bars shutting down due to the drinking culture being much less. On top of that, a lot of the businesses that are coming in, much more tailored to the Muslim and African population. Just to give you guys an idea of my own personal experience as well, I've been walking around, I've been conducting interviews with a lot of people on the street. The men have been fairly friendly and fairly open to speaking with me. However, they are very protective of their culture, and the other Minnesotans that I have interviewed on the street have said the same thing. Like, basically, if you don't mess with them, they won't mess with you, and they're very protective of their culture and quite wary of outsiders. Another thing that I did notice as well is none of the women will speak to me. As soon as they see the camera, they either turn the other way or will lift their hijab higher to cover their faces. So I have not been able to speak to any of the women on the ground. However, the men have been very open in telling me where they are from. For example, I spoke to a Somali man yesterday who stated that he was able to come to the U.S. just last year due to the visa lottery that allowed him to come this way. So just wanted to highlight the cultural evolution, the demographic evolution of this area, and how it is impacting local businesses and staples that have been around for over 100 years.
And this plays into so many of the things that we were talking about. Look at the sign. Our days are numbered. A good example of what happens when you abandon the idea of assimilating to the American culture and instead focus on one that is multiculturalism. Now, we've been told for a really long time that multiculturalism is what we should focus on, that everybody's culture is unique and we should celebrate all of it. Well, the truth is that even our American culture has its good points and its bad points. But the idea of America is we take the good things from your culture and we, put them in the soup and we make our culture better. But that is not what is happening in Minnesota. There's a number of different things to talk about there.
Yeah, we think of America as the melting pot where we take the
Yep.
best elements out of these cultures and bring them there. And some may point high-mindedly, I guess, to the idea, okay, bars are closing, fewer people out drinking. Okay, I don't necessarily have a problem with that. But what's taking its place? The women are afraid to speak. They've got, you saw in there one shot of a private entrance just for the women. I've been in those Muslim nations. I've seen how they're treated. You mentioned earlier, they just call it socialism instead of Islamic socialism. And I would say, no, there's a marked difference because
At its
in
core.
Islam nations, women don't exist.
Mhm.
They are subhuman.
Well, and that's one of the downsides of it. And the reason why I say we should just call it all Marxist is, like, at its core, that's its political foundation. No, I mean, there are other things, there's treatment of women. I mean, that's, look at pretty much any Muslim nation. And there are some that are worse than others. However, I mean, it's pretty much across the board. You're right, Ken. Politically, at its core, though, it's very Marxist. Now, the other thing here, and this kind of goes back to how I opened the program. It's not a function of people drinking less. I mean, it's one of the contributing factors to bars closing. But if you're a bar owner, and this is happening in pretty much every small town, in every town in America, people are drinking less, which is why you've seen just about every single beer company is producing a non-alcoholic version. And some of them are really good, by the way. How many years have I been sober? I think I've been sober 8 years. Haven't had a drop to drink in 8 years. And by the way, it's best decision I ever made because I'm alive. But what I'm getting at is beer companies saw a need in the market that their beer sales were taking a little dip, and they realized that more people aren't drinking nearly as much, and so they produced some non-alcoholic versions. And if you're watching your audience, if you're attuned to what's going on, you're going to have some non-alcoholic products to offer. I mean, no longer do you have to put up with O'Doul's, which, by the way, was just hideous. But now, I mean, there's a Blue Moon version that I really like. It tastes pretty much like I remember. The Guinness is amazing. But there's a lot of different companies, and most liquor stores now, if you go in there, they have a whole cooler full of non-alcoholic beer. But it's because beer companies recognize the need in the market, and that's a way to bolster your sales, even if people are drinking less. But that's not the major function happening in Minneapolis.
Yeah, and if you're a home brewer like I am, and you get the idea, I can brew alcohol-free beer.
Don't try that.
Yeah, you can do it, but it ain't worth it.
It takes way too much time, and the product is not very good if you don't know what you're doing. If you're wondering, Ken and I tried that, and it did not work. It was a resounding failure. But my point is that even if the marketplace that your business exists in is changing, you can make alterations to your business and fill, a different need. All businesses change, the market changes, supply and demand changes, and if you're attuned to what's happening in the market, your business will continue to prosper. But that is not what's happening. It's a contributing factor in Minneapolis, but that's not really what's happening. You have a real lack of assimilation to the American culture. And one of the big contributing factors was the open borders illegal immigration put out by the Biden administration that allowed millions, well, I shouldn't say millions of Islamic folks to come in, but a lot of them. And I mean, that's just a perfect example. Now, if you want to know what New York City is going to look like, go look at London right now. There are no-go zones. And if you've never heard of what a no-go zone is, that's a place in town where if you're a white person or if you're not Muslim, you don't go there because you're probably going to be killed. There are many, many major cities in the world that did not start out Islamic, where there are honor killings on pretty routinely, that women don't have any rights, that there really are the pretty medieval treatment of women that are still happening. And you saw in Minneapolis women walking around in a hijab. Talk about repression. And, it's just another example of if you vote for this Mom Donnie guy in New York, that's your future. Show me your friends, I'll show you your future. Coming up at 9:30, I'm supposed to have a friend of mine who is one of the journalists that work for the paper in Platte County and the Guernsey Gazette. At 9:30, she's supposed to be calling in, and we're going to talk to her about what happened yesterday with Wyoming newspapers. So look forward to that in about, 13, 14 minutes. But yesterday, and this is kind of fun, Trump took a walk on the roof of the White House. From the Associated Press, Trump takes unexpected walk on the White House roof to survey new projects. As you may or may not have known, Trump is building a ballroom at the White House. Shocking though it may be, there is no ballroom right now at the White House. And you would think that at the people's house, that there would be a place to hold grand events. But there's not right now.
Even the Clue game has a ballroom.
Yeah, not the White House, though. But Trump is building one. And the other day, he took a walk on the White House roof. And I've got a video of it. Go ahead and play it, Ken. Listen to what he says. It's kind of hard to hear, but listen close.
Mr. President, what are you doing up there? Taking a little walk. Come down and talk to us. For your help. What are you doing? Go to the ballroom, which is on the other side. Are you connected? More elevations, sir. Hello, Peter. You're looking good, Peter.
Are you going to build up
I
there?
do.
What does that mean?
What do you? More ways to spend my money.
Can you give us another hint?
We'll show you. It's just another way to spend my money for the country. Anything I do is financed by me, so you have to worry, it's contributed. Just like my salary is contributed, but nobody ever mentions that. Are you going to add it on the medal?
No, keep playing.
Mr. President, what do you want to build? What are you trying to build? Missiles. Sir, do you approve nuclear missiles? Are you building missiles?
Now, just imagine what the Secret Service had to put together to let the president walk on the roof. You wouldn't think that if he wanted to take an impromptu jaunt on the roof of the White House that would be a problem. But the president was exposed, and you saw all the people around him. The only reason I bring it up is our president, Donald Trump, is one of the most accessible presidents that I ever remember. I mean, Ronald Reagan was pretty accessible, He'd talk to the press just about anywhere he went, whether he was at his ranch or at the White House, but nowhere near President Trump. Pretty much anytime he's around the media, he'll at least answer a couple of questions. And I think it's great, man. He's standing on the roof, surveying what he's going to build. And my guess is probably going to be some sort of dome over the Oval Office or something cool like that. I mean, it's President Trump. He's building something, and he builds cool stuff.
Yeah, with his own money.
Yes.
That's cool.
No, well, and a lot of what he's doing, and there was a big deal made out of the gold leaf that he was putting inside the Oval Office. Well, he paid for all of it, and it really is pretty. And we all know Donald Trump likes gold. It's the big meme about the golden toilet that he has on his plane, or the golden fixtures, or whatever it is. But anyway, there's a piece in the Turkey Vulture, and this is one of those really deceptive pieces. And I want to start it out, and then I'm going to tell you who wrote it. So, and again, Ken, this is why it's such a pleasure to have you as the producer, because I get to bounce all sorts of ideas off a legislator, and other media outlets, they have to make appointments. Well, I do too, but most of the time you show up. From the Turkey Vulture. Wyomingites would be surprised to learn that blasphemy, and this is the title of this piece is, "It's time for Wyoming to repeal its blasphemy law." Most Wyomingites would be surprised to learn that blasphemy is still mentioned in state law, an anachronism that needs to be corrected. Wyoming Statute 129-106 says that the state's libel laws do not authorize the publication of blasphemous or indecent matter, creating potential civil liability for publications that are deemed blasphemous. Wyoming is one of the just 6 states still having an anti-blasphemy law, alongside Massachusetts, Michigan, Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, and South Carolina. These archaic statutes take a page from America's colonial era, before the U.S. Constitution was adopted, when church and state were entangled in, and Puritan orthodoxy was enforced by law. First of all, the U.S. Constitution says nothing about the separation of church and state. That's a common misconception. You won't find that phrase anywhere in the Constitution or the amendments. And the reason for that is it's completely made up. That was a court ruling that was added later, and it was never intended for there to be a separation between church and state. Now, to be clear, Wyoming does not criminalize blasphemy. Some states still do. But there's no jail time, no fines, no active censorship. But the word blasphemous remains in the statute code, an outdated law from a time when criticizing religion was seen as dangerous or immoral. Now, you might assume that laws like this aren't enforced anymore, but in Pennsylvania, it happened as recently as 2010. George Kalman attempted to register a film production company named I Chose Hell Productions. State officials rejected his application because state statute says corporation names were not allowed to be blasphemous. Thankfully, U.S. District Judge of the Eastern District of Pennsylvania stepped in and allowed him to register that company. Now, in Wyoming, I've heard several anecdotal stories of people trying to get different license plates and the state rejecting them because it was either profanity or some other vulgarity on the license plate. But apparently, we do have a blasphemy statute. And the question is, should it be repealed or not? I absolutely think that we have to have decency statutes. We don't need people running around naked downtown. We don't want people urinating in public or having, public displays of vulgarity. It's the very reason why we have drunk in public laws. It's the same reason why pornography has an 18-year-old or an 18-year age limit on it, that you have to be 18 years of age to purchase it. It's also why we don't have pornography in libraries, because we have decency statutes. But the question for my legislator producer is, should we repeal said blasphemy statute?
I would prefer not.
Yeah, why?
The state constitution gives the legislature the responsibility to maintain morality effectively.
That's Article 7, Section 20, if you're wondering.
Yes, it is. And I can quote book, chapter, verse. And the Constitution's laying right there. We can pick it up. But look it up for yourself. You might learn a little bit about that. And, there's the old expression, you can't legislate morality. No,
we do all the time.
Yeah. No, you can't force anybody to do that. But what these statutes do is make a public statement about what this culture believes is acceptable and what is not, and whether or not there's a punishment. You know, I don't like unenforceable laws in general, but when it comes right down to it, there are certain principles that need to be ensconced, firmly ensconced.
Firmly
My friend
ensconced.
likes to say, into the bedrock of our culture, which is our law.
So here's what Article 7, Section 20 says. As the health and morality of the people are essential to their well-being and to the peace and permanence of the state, it shall be the duty of the legislature to protect and promote these vital interests by such measures for the encouragement of temperance and virtue, and such restrictions upon vice and immorality of every sort, as are deemed necessary to the public welfare. So the Constitution absolutely gives the legislature authority to regulate temperance and virtue and vice and immorality.
And those words need to be kept in context. We need to remember the culture that was prevalent in 1888, 1890, when these words were written, when they were published. Some people say, okay, morality changes.
I don't know that it
I
does,
don't
really.
believe that it does. God never changes.
Well, no, God doesn't change. And I think people's conception of what is right and wrong, though they try to admit it, really doesn't change either. So there is a blasphemy statute, and, you know, those things, I tend to agree with you, Ken. I think we should leave it alone. If it's not broke, don't fix it. But let me tell you about the guy that wrote this. And maybe this will give you a different opinion on the piece. Now, keep in mind, this was published in the Turkey Vulture, the Wyoming Tribune Eagle, this morning. Mickey Dolans is the author of this piece. He's the Regional Government Affairs Manager at the Freedom from Religion Foundation, where he fights to uphold church-state separation and protect religious freedom for all. So, So it's basically it's one of these atheist groups. The Freedom from Religion Foundation, they file lawsuits across the country whenever there is any sort of religious implication, anything. These are the folks, the type of people that try to repeal, or not repeal, but remove the 10 Commandments from city parks and from any government building. Same type of people. But the question, my friends, is why do I bring this up? Because the media, the folks that run the Wyoming Turkey Vulture, intentionally chose this piece to publish, and I haven't looked at their newspaper. I'm not one of those people that pays extra money so I can read the Turkey Vulture in newsprint, but they definitely published it on their website. And, the question is why? Well, I mean, that's I'm not going to say that the editors are of this opinion, but they certainly gave voice to something first that is absolutely apocryphal, that there is no separation of church and state. I mean, I guess if you look at the court ruling, yeah, but that was never intended. That phrase comes from a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptists when they were worried that they were going to be forced to become Catholic after the signing of the Constitution, or the ratification of the Constitution. And Thomas Jefferson wrote them back, and he said, no, don't worry about that. There's a wall of separation we built a wall of separation between church and state. And what he meant is that the state cannot mandate religion. It doesn't say anything about religion influencing our government, which is why when you walk into the Capitol Rotunda in Washington, D.C., every single painting on the wall has a Bible or somebody praying or some other religious type of scene. But it's interesting that the Wyoming media publishes this sort of drivel. We're going to go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to my one of my friends who was one of the journalists who lost her job at the Platte County newspaper and the Guernsey Gazette. Her name is Marie Hamilton. We'll talk to her coming up next.
Everybody say,
It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, What that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those guys that listened to the president just a little bit too closely and now you're tired of winning? Are you getting the feeling that there's been way too many good things happening in our country and you just can't take it anymore? Well, if you are, and you think you should follow Rosie O'Donnell's example and get the heck out of Dodge, you need to call Rebecca Bextel at eXp Realty. She'll make those foreign country living ideas a reality for you. All you have to do is call 307-699-3519, and she'll make sure some freedom-loving, red-blooded American will now live in the home that you no longer want. If you want to sell your house, or if you want to buy one that's way better than the house you have right now, give Rebecca a call. Again, her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only going to get stronger. This program is only going to continue to expand from every county in this state to every state in this country. This program is expanding faster than I can even keep up with. I mean, you can listen to the program on any of your favorite podcasting apps. Well, that's the podcast anyway. And you can listen to Cowboy State Politics live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and Rumble every Tuesday through Friday, most Tuesday through Fridays from 8 to 10 a.m. Well, I'd like to welcome to the program a friend of mine. Her name is Marie Hamilton, and she used to work at a couple of newspapers in Platte County, but was one of the victims of the News Media Corp's closing of all of those papers. Marie, welcome to Cowboy State Politics.
Thank you for having me, David. A pleasure, as always.
Well, how first, I guess, how you doing? I mean, I know it's only been a day, but how you making out?
Well, it comes and goes. So sometimes memories of hope and anticipation, and then shock, sad, anger, regret. So we're still going through the motions.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, that's a lot to take in, and not just for your own family, but I mean, there's a lot of families that lost their income yesterday. What I wanted to ask you, Marie, is why do you think? I mean, if you had to put your finger on it, why do you think that the News Media Corp decided to close all these papers? And it's not just Wyoming. I mean, there were several other states where they closed down some of their interests. Why do you think that they went ahead and did that?
I have no idea. I have no clue. I was never kept abreast of what corporate was doing. Rob did an amazing job of shielding Wyoming newspapers because we were under our own umbrella, and he did a wonderful job in keeping our doors open. And so I don't know. I have no idea what happened at corporate. I don't know why all the papers were shut down so abruptly. I have no idea. I mean, I can only think of a couple of things, but I don't even know if that would be true.
Fair enough. Now, I know that you've been doing a lot of work covering some of the questions surrounding energy development, and I read some of your stories. I think I even covered one of them on the live program. But just kind of give me a sense of some of the coverage that you were working on like right now that isn't going to be covered. And I'm trying to get to like the value of hometown newspapers. So why don't you just tell my listeners about that?
Sure. So we've got two really big cases going on in our little court here in Platte County in Wheatland. As you know, Evan Witt Bradley, the former Wheatland music teacher, he's going to trial soon, starting in September. The other one, Trustini Hoffman, finally getting sentenced. That's the former Glendale clerk who embezzled some money. So those are two really significant cases. The other one, just recently, I covered it last week. It was supposed to go in next week's paper. Town of Glendale won an injunction against the former hotel owners for the historic hotel that's it's crumbling. It's got to go. It can't be saved, even though it's a historical hotel. It can't be saved, and that's not unique to Glendale. The same thing is happening in Chugwater. They just approved economic grant from the state to bring that down and development for other economic needs. So we're losing two historic hotels in Platte County, and no one's going to know that, And then we've got back to school, all the back to school shuffle. That's not going to happen. The school boards and the amazing things that the Chugwater community school, the charter school, all the growth that they're doing. We were anticipating some press releases from the CEO detailing their new accreditation with Cognia and detailing the growth that they've had. So that's not going to get reported. Of course, there's the ongoing battle with the potential violation of Open Meetings Acts with various boards in our county as it relates to NextEra. So that's separate and different, but it's related to NextEra and the proposed project. And then we had a bunch of other stuff. So what we've done is we've taken every claim that NextEra has made to the community, whether it's jobs, economic development, growth, et cetera, and we've compared that to the public filings that they are statutorily required to file with the state, and none of it's matching up. So none of that information is going to get out to our. Right, exactly. And then we've taken the claims from individuals who are both for the project and against the project, and we've been fact-checking those too. And none of that's going to get reported at this point. There are going to be more meetings ran by the community members in different towns. That's not going to get communicated or reported. But the biggest thing is the kids' sports and the FFA and the 4-H and all the small little things that make us a community. The things that draw us together and really drive home that camaraderie between communities. None of that's going to get reported, and that's the travesty. That is the heartbreaking part, at least for me, and that's why I returned to rural journalism, because I love being a part of that. I love sharing those stories.
Right, and that's actually one of the things that Ken and I talked about earlier on in the program. And I don't know if you've been listening to the show, but it's kind of been pretty much a let's talk about the media type of program. But you know, for whatever failings we could attribute to small town newspapers, and I mean, not saying your newspaper, but there are a lot in Wyoming that are just entirely biased one way or pretty much all to the left. But one of the things that most Wyoming newspapers do pretty well at is covering the sports. Every kid wants to have their picture in the paper. And it's, letting parents know and the community know what's happening with their local sports. And it's, I think that you said it correctly, that the paper helps create a sense of community. And there's a lot of communities in Wyoming now that they don't have that anymore.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, and it's not just Platte County community, right? I frequently communicated with Goshen and all the communities next to me in our sister papers, which is how we found out some of the things that NextEra was doing. We're not matching up between the two communities. And so there's a lot of support, at least here in eastern Wyoming, between Goshen and Platte, which is, it's mind-blowing. It's the outpouring, David. I'm going to cry again. The outpouring of love and support and determination to get our papers back online has blown me away. People I never met, people I probably never talked to, or maybe did in passing, have reached out, and it's humbling, and I'm just blown away by the support here.
Yeah.
Who would have thought we'd had that in rural Wyoming, you know?
Well, and I think that that's something that a lot of us probably take for granted, that when something like this happens, the community tends to come together. And we went through a very similar thing in Buffalo. I say I don't live in Buffalo anymore, but the local radio station shut down. And, that was the Bighorn, part of the Bighorn Mountain Radio, that tax evasion thing. But there's no radio station in Buffalo anymore, which means that there's no broadcasting of local sports, which means there's no, on location at the Johnson County Fair and Rodeo, which means that there's no showing up at a local business to highlight, a new business showing up. So, I mean, I completely understand. Ken's got something for you.
Yeah, another thing that local papers do. When I was in high school, I was very much into journalism, and I actually worked part of the time for the Grable Standard, and go in and take photographs and do layouts and reporting, things like that. There was also a little radio station there up on the hill, and they would let us go in there and DJ for an hour or so in the afternoon. And it was kind of a proving ground, an opportunity for the youth to try their hand at something.
Yeah.
And so I think there's tremendous value in those things, but they need to find a way to survive on their own. And, we were talking earlier about find a need and fill it. And I think there's a need there. And if those things are done properly, there's a place to do this independently.
Absolutely. And, so go ahead.
I was just going to say, and we know that's in the works, right? The publishers here are in eastern Wyoming. Again, I don't know what's going on the western side. I can only speak to the eastern side. But the other publishers here in eastern Wyoming, they all called almost immediately when they got the news. Matt from Douglas, Bob Bonner, Stevenson, they all called one of us, some of us, and they're showing tremendous outpouring of support and looking for a path forward for us. So not only do we have community rallying behind us, we've got our own peers in our industry rallying behind us. And that speaks to the volume of staff and personnel we have in the newsrooms out here on the eastern side. Because if you don't have great staff, that the rest of the industry is looking at and going, this is a good person. This is someone who represents the brand well. And that brand being Wyoming News, right? The Wyoming Press Association and whatnot. So if you didn't have that caliber of staff, you wouldn't have publishers like Bob Bonner and Matt stepping up, So that's humbling too, to know that these people, our peers, aren't going to just let us fade away and fade out. But then we've got investors and other people in different types of media, podcasts, who own large podcasts, reaching out going, what can we do to get you guys back? Because this is a travesty, because all of Southeast Wyoming now, with the exception of Cheyenne, without a news, how can we let that happen? We can't. That can't go on.
Well, and I think that I know that it's your local newspaper that if it's run fairly, I mean, it is supposed to be anyway, like the watchdog of local government. And, I say all the time that you are much more likely to lose your liberty at the local level than you are, with those folks down in Cheyenne or in Washington, D.C. And it is your local newspaper, at least it's supposed to be, the ones that keep an eye on what the city council's doing, what the county commissioners are doing. And without a local paper, they're kind of allowed to run roughshod and do whatever they want because nobody will ever know.
That was exactly my very first thought when Rob told us what was going on. I didn't think, oh no, I don't have a job. I didn't think anything about myself, like what my next steps would be. My very first thought was, oh my gosh, we have this big thing going on with these potential violations of Open Meetings Act going on in Platte County right now. And the Wyoming Press Association lawyer had sent a cease and desist demand letter to these entities telling them, hey, that was a potential violation, don't do it again. And now my immediate thought was, oh my God, are they going to exploit this?
Oh, yeah.
Is someone going to exploit this back? Because they know that we don't have the paper up and running, which is later why I posted to my readers what I posted. This is not done. This is not over. Whether or not I'm paid, I am still a Wyoming Press Association credentialed member. I'm still going to show up. Even if I just put it on Facebook or a blog or a website, I am still going to do my job until a permanent solution becomes available.
Well, and that's, I mean, I think that speaks to your own personal credibility and your dedication to the craft that you do. And I think it's extraordinarily important. And without journalists like yourself, we probably wouldn't know about all the stuff that Next Era or anybody else is trying to pull. So anyway, Marie, appreciate you joining me on the program. And you and I will be talking a little bit later. So hang tight, and I'll give you a call after we finish up the program.
Awesome. Thank you, David. I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'll talk to you in a little bit. All right, that was Marie Hamilton, and she used to work for, and I'm probably going to get the name of the other paper wrong, but the Guernsey Gazette and then the Platte County newspaper. So good journalist. I mean, she's been doing a lot of work with this Next Era, and I appreciated one of the pieces that she did recently about being basically thrown out of a meeting. As that has happened to me, I can tell you that it is, as a journalist, it's pretty darn frustrating. And it's a violation of open meetings laws. And interestingly enough, that happened in the Wyoming Capitol. It was Art Washut that threw me out of a meeting, which, we laugh at it now because it's kind of funny. But anyway, a lot of journalists that are out of work, and, a lot of them are really dedicated to what they do. And like Marie said, this isn't over. They're personally invested in the stories that they're reporting on, and they're going to continue.
I forgot how hard that was to hear, but that's people shouting questions at Harriet. She says, get a sense of humor. And I think that's something that is a good piece of advice to hometown papers. Sometimes we take ourselves too seriously.
Oh, I agree.
And that niche, as we've discussed several times today, that niche of being able to fill, who else is going to cover what happens in Chugwater? I mean, even though we're fairly small, we're not going to do that because we can't do that for every town around the state. But there needs to be that touch. There is a niche for that. And somewhere, maybe the staff is going to be reduced to 2 people.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I mean, you ask a good question. Like, who is going to care what happens in Chugwater? The people that live in Chugwater care. And when it is your local. It's supposed to be your local newspaper that holds elected officials accountable. And that doesn't happen in all cases. I mean, I would argue that in Sheridan and Buffalo, you don't have that sort of oversight over elected officials. And I think in some cases, your local paper gets intertwined with government because of the very reasons I mentioned at the top of the program, that they're dependent upon government in many cases. But that's not the case with Marie, or I think with the Newsletter Journal over in Newcastle. They've been very critical of local government, and they've been doing great work. And Marie has also, and Bob Bonner over in Newcastle.
I guess it just depends on what side you're on, because they like to try to hold me responsible.
Well, yeah. I mean, you're on the wrong side as far as the Sheridan Compress is concerned. But anyway, so we'll be. I'll keep my eyes on this whole media thing happening in Wyoming, and as I mentioned earlier on the program, I might have a solution to some of this. Not quite ready to let the cat out of the bag. I'm just telling you that I saw an itch, and I'm just one of those people that I just can't resist. I found a need, or I think I found a need, and we're going to try to fill it. Well, and we've got about 10 minutes left in the program, but I do have one more soundbite that I readied for you. And you've probably heard about what the Democrats in Texas are trying to do. And there's a vote that's imminent on redistricting. It happens in every single state. And, the claim is that Republicans are trying to gerrymander some legislative districts. And again, it's not gerrymandering. It's gerrymandering. It's named after Eldridge Gary, who he created his own legislative district that looked like a salamander. And so they called it gerrymandering. Anyway, the Democrats are saying that Republicans are trying to gerrymander legislative districts in Texas. Now, there's a piece in the Blaze Entitled Just a Waiting Game. Ken Paxton tells Glenn Beck what fate awaits absentee Texas Democrats. And let me just read to you a couple of the paragraphs, and then we'll get to the soundbite. And I quote, Texas House Democrats fled to Illinois and other blue states on Sunday in an effort to thwart the people's will and to block the passage of a redistricting plan that would help the GOP gain 5 more congressional pickup opportunities ahead of the midterm elections. Texas Governor Greg Abbott gave the derelict Democrat House members, and that's in quotation marks, an ultimatum: return to Texas and show up to work by 3 p.m. on Monday or face possible removal. The absentee legislators, evidently keen to test their luck, refused to show up. Attorney General Ken Paxton told Blaze Media co-founder Glenn Beck on Tuesday that the Texas Democrats are playing the waiting game and that they will ultimately lose. Go ahead and play that soundbite. This is Ken Paxton on Glenn
The
Beck.
Democrats don't like the fact that the Republicans are going to do some gerrymandering here, which is done everywhere else. So they have left the state. This is the 3rd time they've done it. So what is their plan? What should happen? And what are you, as the Attorney General and the governor, going to do about it?
First of all, it's pretty ironic that they're going to Illinois, New York, and Massachusetts, 3 of the most liberal states, and some of the most gerrymandered states in the country. I think Illinois might be the most gerrymandered. If you look at Illinois and how it's drawn, I think 82% of the members of Congress are Democrats, whereas 48% of the population votes Republican. So it doesn't match up even closely. So they leave Texas as the Democrats, the 51, some of them go to Chicago, to a state that is completely gerrymandered. So it's really hypocritical in my view, what they're doing, as you've already mentioned in the prelude to talking to me. So the goal here is, I honestly would have locked them up when they were in the House. Texas House Speaker could have shut the doors and kept everybody in. We've done that. We did that back in 2003. And once the doors are locked, you can't get out. And you spend the night there and you vote. And they could have done that. They did not do that. So they let the cat out of the bag. The cat's gone. So now you either arrest them, which you're not going to get help from jurisdictions like Illinois, Boston. You're not going to get help, Massachusetts or New York. So arresting them is not likely scenario until they come back. What has happened in the past is our governors have waited them out, because ultimately many of them have to come back. They have jobs, they have families. They're not going to live in Illinois. It gets cold up there. New York's cold, Boston's cold. So they come back and we vote. And every time we've ultimately been successful. Another option we're looking at, as a matter of fact, when I get off this call, I'm meeting with a bunch of my lawyers to talk about this quo warranto, which is a possibility that we looked into a couple of years ago. We suggested it might be a way to take existing members out of their positions if they fail to show up to perform their duties.
Now, you take them out of the positions, but then there has to be a special election. So you can't go right to vote, right?
Yeah, no, because that changes the quorum. I think it'll change the quorum. So you have less members, your quorum numbers change.
There you go.
So
okay, that's good enough. And so essentially what happened is these Democrats didn't want to vote on the redistricting plan because they knew they were going to lose. And the only thing that they could do is prevent a quorum in the Texas legislature. And so they left the state. They went to Illinois, ironically, one of the most gerrymandered states in the entire country. And Ken, I mean, you're in the House. Why don't you tell our listeners about what a quorum is, why you have to have it, what happens on the floor, if it happens.
A quorum, obviously, is you've got to have basically a simple majority of the members of that organization there, so that a small elite few can't just go run roughshod over the rest. It's kind of the whole principle of that America is built on. It's not a pure democracy where people can just vote it over, but you have a balance between the masses and individual liberty, and this works as a counterbalance, a yin and yang kind of thing. So maybe that answered your question.
Well, kind of. I mean, it's to protect the minority is what it is. That you can't vote unless you have a majority of the members elected, I think. And what Ken Paxton was saying is if you remove them from office, and I'm not arguing about the legitimacy or illegitimacy of their plan, but If you remove those members from office because they didn't show up to vote, well, then your quorum numbers change because those people aren't elected anymore. You've removed them, and so you reduce the amount of people that have to be present. And I think this is only legitimate if there are set rules that you have to, you can only miss this many votes. You have to be present for this amount of time. You have to be present at the legislature. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. If those rules exist, and I don't know if they do, that would be the only way that I would be for it. I mean, I'm not. I've never been one for playing legislative games. I mean, the rules of the game are set, and you got to follow them. That's why they exist, is to protect the rights of the minority.
I did hear both you and he use the expression, let the cat out of the bag. Do you know where that came from?
No.
Back in the
Some
days...
guy with a cat in a bag?
Meow. Back in the days of sailing ships, the captains had a cat of 9 tails. It was kept in a bag until it was time to administer punishment.
Oh.
Oh, no, you've let the cat out of the bag.
Ah, fair enough. I never knew the derivation of that phrase. Well, anyway, my friends, lots of stuff happening around the country, and I think the biggest story here in Wyoming is, the closing of those newspapers. Not that a corporation can't close up shop whenever it wants, but I think that Marie hit the nail on the head when she said, "Well, what about all these local communities? How are people going to know what's going on? How big of a loss was that to all of these 8 communities that now they don't have a local paper?"
I actually see it as a huge opportunity.
I think it's a gigantic opportunity
for a lot of people to be able to jump in there and actually do things without the overlord. They always accuse the Wyoming Freedom Caucus of taking their orders from above. This is an opportunity to counter that.
Well, and you bring up our timing has just been on point this morning. So the media for a really long time have been the gatekeepers. That they've been like, if you want information out to the public, you have to go to them. And if they don't think it's important enough, well, then they're just not going to print it. They're not going to cover the story. That time has passed, my friends. The gatekeepers no longer hold all the power of media. We have social media, and you have programs like this one, which, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of work, but we're not beholden to any of the gatekeepers anymore. And I think that, while it is sad that a lot of these newspapers have closed and a lot of people are out of a job, I think it is a gigantic opportunity. It is just one more sign that the gatekeepers are no longer sitting on top of their ivory tower.
Wasn't that Rick Moranis that was the gatekeeper?
Yeah, the keymaster or the gatekeeper, whatever. Well, my friends, we burned up another busy broadcast, 2 hours on the program. Make sure that you don't miss tomorrow's show, Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics Live. Tomorrow, beginning at 8 a.m. all the way until 10. Don't miss a minute of the program. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. See you tomorrow, my friends.